Hello and welcome to the first video of where I explain basically what biogeography is. So, as we know, we are talking about soil here, and I was explaining it to Mr. Pikachu that how soil basically works. So, if you don't know, we already have our first student, and the name of our first student is Mr. Pikachu. So, basically, what is soil? Soil is basically okay, any guesses what soil is? Like you would say that it's like powdered form of rocks. Like if you have that amount of idea about what soil is, you would say that it's. And if you have a better idea, I would say weathered rocks, basically, like where rocks become so much weathered they become into finer and finer and finer things, and they become soil. Have you ever thought about the fact that why are sandy soils also called soil and why alluvial soils is also called soils? Yes, because it's just the matter of fact that the mineral composition of sand is different and the degradation level of the sand is different than the alluvial soil. But at the same time, it's actually weathering, it's actually weathered rocks. But we cannot call weathered rocks soil. Isn't it, Mr. Pikachu? Well, I explained it to Mr. Pikachu a few minutes ago, a couple minutes ago, that it does not work like that. It does not work like that you have a couple of pieces of rocks, they get into weathered form and they become soil. Well, that's called dust. That's called mineral dust. That's called minerals. Basically, minerals. Well, when we think about soil, it's not just mineral. It's not just mineral, there is a lot more to soil, isn't it, Mr. Pikachu? So, when we think about soil, it should be mineral, but there are four things that should be also there in the rock or in the soil. Three other things other than mineral. First being mineral, second being, yep, water. We have always thought about water, but never thought about the fact that water is also a part of soil. For example, if you plant a plant, if you plant a plant into the soil and at the same time you see that, well, the plant is not growing. What makes it grow? When you put a seed into a dry soil, does it grow? No, it does not. It won't grow. Obviously, it won't grow. What is the factor that makes it grow? Water. When you add water, it reaches a level of saturation, and that is the point when the reaction starts to happen. And that's why you get a plant. So, the second factor is water. What is the third factor? Well, let's make a soil and then put water into it and put a plant into it and then just make it really really compact, like there is just water and there is just soil. What would happen? It would just rot. The first one wouldn't grow if there is no water, and if you add too much of water and there is no air, it starts to rot. So what is the third component? It's air. Why is it air? Because without air pores, the soil, the roots cannot breathe. So that is the another component of soil. It is air, not oxygen. That's a particular portion of the air or atmosphere basically. But you cannot say oxygen because plants do need oxygen and carbon dioxide both in the different ratios. What is the last factor? What is the last factor that makes the soil soil? Basically, you have water, you have mineral dust, you have air, but it still won't be a soil. Why? What do we add to a soil? We add, we add, we add vermicompost. We add compost. What is compost? It is an organic compound. It is an organic compound of the soil. Basically, it lets you remind that if you have all the minerals there, the water, the air, the soil, the mineral dust, and still won't be a soil. To make it a soil, you need a bit of a organic thing. So next we are talking about the factors of soil. So when we are talking about the factors of soil, there are two factors. One is the active factor, one is the passive factor. Okay? So when we talk about the active factors, two things comes in our mind, which is living organisms and the second is climate. Why active? We'll talk about that in a while. First, we need to know what are the passive factors. So the passive factors are parent material, time, and relief. Okay, now the question comes that why active and why passive? So passive things basically represent how the soil is made. Basically, the procedure of soil making requires a number of compounds, a number of particulates, the number of, how would I explain? A number of requirements are there for soil to perform. First is the parent material. Without the parent material, you can't really form soil. You can't have the relief without the parent material, and time doesn't really work without the parent material. So it's like the most important thing is the parent material. Then you have time, and then you have relief. What are the active factors? Okay. When we think about passive factors, these are the things that make up the things that active factors can act upon. What do I mean by that? Active factors are basically ones that act upon the passive factors and make up the soil. The climate is a passive factor because if there is no time, relief, and parent material, the climate cannot really act upon anything. So it needs some passive materials for it to act on it actively. And living organisms obviously can't really act upon it if there are no parent material, time, and relief. So now that we have talked about what are the factors, we basically, okay, if you are getting a bit confused about what are the active factors and why active factors are there and like passive factors, basically like you are getting good or bad grades on your exam because you have an exam. How would I explain it? Well, basically, because we have a school, because you have education, that is why you're good and bad student. If there were no like exams or anything, you would not be a good or bad student. For example, the person is poor or rich is determined by how much money they make, how much taxes they pay, and stuff like that. What if there was no government, there was no nothing and all? If there was no hierarchy, you wouldn't be poor or rich. That is a fun fact about everything, you know? Okay. The next thing. Okay, the next thing is, we'll talk about the next thing in the next video.